Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer. For this video on Elden Ring, we have the top 8 cosplay builds that focuses on bosses and characters from the Dark Souls series. This build video is meant for pure fun, focusing on awesome characters, looks, and some cool cosplay choices for Elden Ring. Before we continue though, a quick shout out to G Fuel. If you need to get hyped up for this video and want something that tastes good too, be sure to check out the link in the description below for 20% off. The first build here is Atorias the Abysswalker, which has some interesting lore as well. This Souls boss is from Dark Souls 1 and has been corrupted by the Abyss, leading to a dark armor look in the original game and black flame vibes in Elden Ring. The boss themselves is formerly and possibly still the Knight, and Lion's Claw fits the attack patterns quite well. This is to mimic his overall leap that he does, and I've chosen the Knight's greatsword, although any regular greatsword would look great too. If you're wondering how I sound or why I sound different, I have a little bit of a cold at this current time, given the fact that the weather changed and the temperature dropped greatly where I'm at, so that's why I do sound a little bit as far as having the cold situation. Anyways, we're going to go forward with this video. This is going to be an awesome one, by the way. We've got a ton of different characters, bosses, etc. And we do have the sort of classic sword shield build. I think that's the next one up that a lot of people have been requesting. Now for this build for Atorias the Abysswalker, generally speaking you're going to use Black Flame Blade, and then you can use Lion's Claw for some posture damage, good damage in general, and then although Black Flame Blade is way too quick in my opinion, you will get the percentage and fire damage as well. All in all, it's a cool build. I don't really do a lot with Black Flame Blade because of the fact that it's so quick. It's one of the quickest incantations in Elden Ring that you can use for like your sword or whatever. It's too quick. It's literally, what, 5-10 seconds? It doesn't last long enough most times, but it does have a really awesome and cool look to it, so there is that. At least that's a huge plus. Let's get into all of the equipment, stats, and everything you need to know for Atorias the Abysswalker build. Now we're going to get into equipment for this build and setup for a Black Flame Blade build. We have the Knight's Heavy Greatsword with Black Flame Blade, Godslayer Seal, Raging Wolf Helm, Fingerprint Armor. We have the Fire Monk Gauntlets and Scaled Greaves. We have the Shard of Alexander. We have the Two Fingers Heirloom. We have the Ritual Swords Talisman, Dragoncrest Great Shield Talisman. Then we have the Faith tier and Defense tier. Let's get into stats for this one. Now we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength and then Black Flame Blade. You can add in Scouring Black Flame if you want to. We have 60 Vigor and then we ended up with 65 Strength. Pretty minimal Faith at 20, 30 with the Faith tier. The second build we have here for our Elden Ring cosplay builds isn't based on a specific boss, but instead a complete nod to Dark Souls 3. This is a mix between a Pyromancer from the Firestorm meta days and a sword and shield character that can take on most bosses. I've been asked very often to do a sword and shield character, and I did this one as a throwback using the brass shield here and impaling thrust on a broadsword. We did it in flame art as well to go with the Firestorm meta that we can do with Burn O' Flame shortly. The combat is meant to start relatively slow, with adding in fire incantations to complete the mix of Pyromancer and Knight classes in Dark Souls 3. And anybody that remembers that the comparison in Elden Ring, the closest thing you probably have to Firestorm is going to be Burn O' Flame, and then we have Giant's Flame Take Thee that you can see on screen here, which also does massive damage too. And then of course we have our sword and shield, and our sword, our broadsword, is in flame art and has C scaling with Faith. By the way, there will be shoutouts towards the end of this video for people in Discord that helped me with these. We put a lot together. We ended up going over different armors and coming up with different things for the builds. I want to specifically thank user Foxy Woxy on Discord and then Caustic too, because both of you guys helped me so much as far as these builds go, and it was super helpful. If you guys are into more cosplay builds or fun builds, or just want to keep the game fun but you're still playing Elden Ring, looking for things to do, just let me know if there's anything that you want to see. I'm thinking about doing other stuff like maybe, I don't know, a Lord of the Rings build, a couple different things that people have been asking me to do, so keep me posted if that's something you want to see. Comment below. Now here we're going to be taking on Godric, using Burn O' Flame to mimic Firestorm as it's the closest incantation as we mentioned. You can boost it with 2 Giant Seals, or if you don't have a second one, you can use the Jellyfish Shield too. Godric is relatively easy, but we're on New Game Plus 7, and I do get a little greedy here. That being said, this is a perfect balance of being able to block and battle while also being able to dish out a ton of damage as well. For those looking to add some fire to their build, so to speak, feel free to put your weapon on Flame Art for a C or B scaling with Faith. Some weapons have B scaling, it's awesome. This is a powerful build option for Elden Ring, meant as a classic throwback to the Dark Souls series. Yeah, I really like this build combination because you have the sword and shield, so if you want to use that, if you want to parry like I did I think in the beginning with Margit, or if you just want to go right at whatever boss you're facing, use Burno Flame, aka Firestorm as we keep saying, and then Giant's Flame Take Thee to do a lot of fire damage. And Godric is really fun to fight, especially when you have powerful incantations. He does have a lot of HP on New Game Plus 7, and his resistances are reasonable, but overall it is Godric at the end of the day. He's going to be fairly easy, and his moveset is definitely on the slower side. By the way, if you follow to this point, definitely be sure to hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit that button. I'm not going to say smash that button, but yeah, hit the button for subscribe, and definitely turn the bell on too if you want to check out some awesome Elden Ring builds and become a part of an awesome community. By the way, the Discord's going to be in the description below. Feel free to join that too if you have any questions. I'm always there to answer them and to help with anything you need for Elden Ring. Yeah, sometimes people drop in the Discord and they're a little bit shy. Don't worry about that. Feel free to ask whatever questions and I'll help with them. For this, we have two giant seals. We had the broadsword and flame art with impaling thrust, the brass shield. We had the raging wolf armor on. We had the shard of Alexander, fire scorpion charm, ritual swords talisman, ritual shield talisman, fire tier, defense tier. Let's get into stats. So you can see here we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, Giant's Flame Take Thee, and Burno Flame. We have 60 Vigor, 25 Mind. You probably only need 30 Endurance, but I had 35. And then we have 60 Faith for a well-rounded build for Sword and Shield Pyromancer. The next build is Gravelord Nito, who's a mix of skeletons and has an army with him. You can even use the skeletal summons if you're a summoner to add to the vibe for this build. Gravelord Nito goes with the Magworm Scale Sword as well as Poison Mist Incantation. This combination gives him the sword and poison look he has in Dark Souls. The Gravelord is past the darkest areas of Dark Souls, spending time with the undead and waiting to ambush the player. The Gravelord is another solid option for an Elden Ring build. And you can see with the Magworm Scale Sword on screen, we're able to do a lot of damage. It does a lot of physical damage, a lot more physical damage from the strength component than you do get from your fade stat based on the Magworm Scale Sword, so definitely be sure to move your points over more towards strength if you're using this weapon. Overall, a really fun build, and it definitely looks cool with the Royal Remains set, and the Magworm Scale Sword fits him too, gives him a nice curved sword look, and I like the damage on it. I like the fact that it is a strength faith weapon. Let's get into equipment. We have the Magworm Scale Sword, preferably plus 10. We have any seal will do for this one. We have the Royal Remains set on. We have the Shard of Alexander, the Two Fingers Heirloom. We have the Ritual Swords Talisman, Kindred of Rot's Exaltation for Poison Mist. We have the Faith tier, Fire tier. Let's get into stats for this build and setup. For stats, we have 65 Strength, we have 30 Faith with the Faith tier, we have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, and then 35 Endurance. You probably only need 30, and then we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Poison Mist for a well-rounded Gravelord build based on boss from Dark Souls. Build number 4 here is Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. This build is probably one of my favorites on this list, utilizing a combination of Flaming Strike on a Greatsword and ranged lightning incantations. The Iron Greatsword is particularly good with this build too. I did end up using the Knight Sword, by the way, because it was easier for me to get. Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, by the way, is the final boss in Dark Souls, and using a Fire Sword as well as the ability to use range attacks gives you a lot of variety and fits the theme. The Lightning certainly fits the theme, definitely Lightning Spear, and you're able to send up lightning spells basically for your ranged attack, and up close you have a Fire Sword. Gwyn is the strongest lord in Dark Souls, often looking over the others and being the first to link the flame. If anybody's looking for lore information there, as far as Dark Souls bosses goes, it is the final boss of the game, and Gwyn is a very cool build to use. This is pretty awesome, being able to throw in Lightning Spear with Flaming Strike on the Knight's Greatsword or the Iron Greatsword for an awesome look, powerful build. Yeah, he definitely makes for a very powerful build, and probably, as I mentioned, one of my favorites on this list. I really do like the ability to jump back and use Lightning Spear, and then up close, Flaming Strike is becoming one of my favorite Ashes of War. You probably heard me say that a lot, but it's so good, and then the follow-up attack and the Sword on Fire is really cool. By the way, we took on side bosses and early game main bosses too. For the main bosses, I actually had started on Journey 24, I think I was going to in total, and here we're using Hole and Bolt to add on to the variety. That also gives you range on top of Lightning Spear, and then we can go back, use Lightning Spear one more time, and take out the dragon. Pretty cool way to end it. I definitely like ending it that way with Lightning Spear. It's pretty awesome. They do take extra damage to the head as far as dragons go. For our equipment, we have the Knight's Greatsword with Flaming Strike. You can use 2 Gravelstone Seals or 1 Elden Lord Crown, Black Flame, our chest piece, and then Guardian Bracers, Guardian Greaves. For talismans, we have the Phlox Canvas Talisman, Lightning Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, we have the Fire tier, and then we have the Faith tier. Let's get into stats. For stats, for this one is heavily invested in Faith. We hit 80 Faith and 60 Vigor. That's with the Faith tier, by the way. We have the Golden Val Ash of War, Flame Grant Me Strength, Hole and Bolt, and then Lightning Spear for a well-rounded build. 23 Mind and 27 Endurance too. This is a really powerful one. We're going to show this one off a little bit more here on some mobs. To show this build off further, we're going to show some mobs and this build's ranged attacks. Against the mobs here, we're using Lightning Spear, although you can use Hole and Bolt as well. This is a powerful ranged option for those that like lightning builds with a mix of fire in there. Fire Sword and Flaming Strike works well too, as it's becoming, as I mentioned, one of my favorites, and it really is enjoyable. If you haven't picked up this Ash of War yet, it's at Redmane Castle. Be sure to pick it up. Yeah, it just does a lot of damage. And don't forget about the follow-up, by the way. I'm on Xbox here, but we're going to be hitting L2, and then you're going to be following up with R2. So it's a 2-part Ash of War. The second part is going to be the part that sets your sword on fire. Don't forget that. A lot of people have asked me how to put the sword on fire. It is a 2-part Ash of War to make it even more powerful. Next build here is Pontiff Sulyvahn, who can be turned into a cool looking build for Elden Ring. Pontiff has a really cool look to him if you add the sleeping grease on one sword and put the other sword on fire. This combination leads to a very weird build that somehow works well too, mixing sleep and fire damage. I took on the Red Wolf of Radagon here, and it was a fun fight that I enjoyed since this dog rarely makes it into my videos. He has very low HP and often vanishes quickly. Yeah, even on New Game Plus 7, this dog probably has like 5,000 HP. It really does not have a lot of health and can be taken down quickly with pretty much any build in the game, no matter what you're using. I think he's somewhat magic resistant maybe, but aside from that, very squishy. Let's get into equipment for the Pontiff Sulyvahn build. By the way, you can see here we have the Sleeping Grease, Fire Sword, and a general decent look for him, I think, as far as the rope goes and everything. And the swords, definitely like the way they turned out, because we got the purple and then we have the orange too. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we have the Knight's Greatsword with Flaming Strike, the other Greatsword for Sleeping Grease and Heavy Affinity, Gideon's Helm, we have the Lazuli Robe, I believe it's called. The Gold Bracers go best with this, and the Bandit Boots, Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Shield Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Fire tier, Defense tier. And then we have the Sleeping Grease too. Let's get into stats here. For our stats, we have 60 Vigor, 25 Mind. You probably only need 30 Endurance, so you can put 5 more points back into Faith. And then we have 60 Faith. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength, by the way, for a well-rounded Pontiff build. Also, in a second on Renala, we're going to show off this build one more time. This was a really fun one to do. I like the combination of the Fire and Sleeping Grease sword. Interestingly, Pontiff is one of the tougher bosses in Dark Souls 3, and trained the toughest boss in my opinion in Dancer of the Boreal Valley. His lore is mainly focused around Ithril and his cathedral there, where the player faces him. He has an extra version of himself during the fight, something of a spectral that you could use Mimic for if you like to run a build similar. This is another powerful option for those that like Flaming Strike, along with the ability to put players and bosses to sleep with the offhand Sleep Sword. The purple and orange can definitely match his style. On a side note, I wasn't sure what mask to use, so I did end up going for Gideon's. I think I mentioned that. There are a few other options, I'm sure, for this one that could be better mask-wise, but I just ended up going for this. I know it looks probably more like the Lord of the Rings mask here, but overall I felt like it kind of fit, and at the same time I was really going for the weapon and build setup that Pontiff has. As you know me, I mainly do builds based on weapons, spells, damage, etc. So with cosplay stuff, I'm still kind of new to the territory, and yeah, I'm far from perfect at times with some of this stuff, but I think a lot of it came out really well for this one. I like the way this one came out. I really like Dark Souls, and I like mixing the Dark Souls universe into Elden Ring. I think it's a good combination, and it can turn into some really powerful builds too that are a lot of fun to use, and this one is definitely no exception. The next build up here is Dark Sun Gwyndolin, and for this we have his setup as magic, and I know he's not going to be using the jellyfish shield, but we're going to be using Comet Azure here to fit the theme, and then I'm going to show you a couple different things, including the full moon crossbow that can go with this build. As you're going to see with the Comet Azure setup, we can do a lot of damage here at 150, and we only use the Golden Vow Ash of War for our buffs, and Terra Magica, of course, we're using the Carrion Regal Scepter, and then we have the Jellyfish Shield 2, and the Magic tier, because that always goes well with Comet Azure, and the Infinite FP tier. We're going to get into equipment here in a second, after we show off the Full Moon Crossbow as part of the build, and Glintstone Stars, or Stars of Ruin works too. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we have the Carrion Regal Scepter, plus 10 preferably, Golden Vow on a dagger. We don't need a seal, Jellyfish Shield. We have the Full Moon Crossbow. We have the Radiant Gold Mask, Concert Robe, Snow Witch Skirt. Then we have, for talismans, Graven Mask Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman. We have the Infinite FP tier, and then we have the Magic tier. Let's get into stats for this one. As you can see here, we're using Comet Azure. We also have Terra Magica, Glintstone Stars, or Stars of Ruin works as well. We only went for 50 Vigor because we have 75 Intelligence, and we have a good amount of Mind for a well-rounded magic build. And we're going to show off here in a second the Full Moon Crossbow and the build as a whole and how powerful and fun it can be. And here we have the Full Moon Crossbow, and then you can use Stars of Ruin. I just didn't go out of my way to grab it, so I was using Glintstone Stars. That goes well with the Comet Azure setup, so you have something for quick attacks, basically, and ranged attacks. And we're going to be using the Full Moon Crossbow here, which scales with Intelligence and fits the overall build for Dark Sun Gwyndolin. Makes for a powerful mixture of magic and using a crossbow. I don't use crossbows. I don't know about you guys, whether or not you use crossbows much in Elden Ring. I haven't even really experimented much with the jar cannon or some of the ranged attack stuff. Overall, I do feel like they're a little bit lesser of a class of weapons in Elden Ring, and I hope in DLC we get something really good for them that either does a lot of damage or just makes more sense than the current crossbows that we have, and the current bows too. The bows in the game sometimes feel a little underwhelming too, aside from a couple of the great bows. We definitely need something good there in DLC. Next build we have here is the Four Kings build, which focuses on Pest Threads and the Flame Mace with Wild Strikes. The Four Kings can also use an offhand lifesteal ability to mimic the Dark Wraiths in Dark Souls 1 and 3. This build focuses on the combination of Wild Strikes with Pest Threads for bigger bosses to show off some of the abilities of the Four Kings. Be sure to comment anything you want to add to the lore here, as I've gone off of what I remembered mostly. The lore from Dark Souls was quite good, as is Elden Ring lore, and as usual, it is pieces given to complete a puzzle. For the Four Kings, I do remember them being a difficult boss at Dark Souls, at least for me at the time, and for Elden Ring it makes for a powerful build. Now the Flame Mace can be a little bit difficult to farm for, but we do have a nice Pest Threads build here that can absolutely shred some of the bigger bosses in the game. And we're going to be able to dodge this here. His tail swipe is definitely highly damaging if you get hit by that, and then of course try to aim for the dragon's head if you can. And then in the middle of the dragon, Pest Threads with larger targets. It can just do a lot of damage. It does a ton of physical damage to the bigger bosses in the game. You can actually use it for Elden Beasts, some of the tougher large bosses, to absolutely shred their HP. And if you want to add in the Flame Mace with Wild Strikes, you can do a lot of damage in that regard too. I was just choosing to use Pest Threads because I chose to take on the dragon, and then Black Flame will go with the overall build for the Four Kings too. And then the helm we have with the horns on and the Knight's Cavalry armor makes for a good combination to give you a general look of the Four Kings in Dark Souls. In a second here, we're going to finish off the dragon, and afterwards we're going to go over the build and setup, everything you need to know for the Four Kings build for this setup. We're going to go over equipment here in a second, and then we have the last one, which is a build I really like. The last one's great, and this one, something I sort of covered for, but I think I made it better. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we have the Monk's Flame Art Flame Mace we have Wild Strikes on it, Godslayer's Seal, we have the Great Horn Headband, Knight's Cavalry Set, not altered, Phlox Canvas Talisman, Fire Scorpion Charm. You can use the Rotten Wing Sword insignia if you're using Wild Strikes, or the Ritual Swords Talisman as a whole, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. Then we have the Thorny tier, Faith tier. Let's go over stats for this one. For stats, we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, Pest Threads, and Black Flame, by the way. We have 60 Vigor, 23 Mind, 27 Endurance, and then we went for 80 Faith. This is a heavily faith-based build for a well-rounded and powerful Four Kings build. Last build here is probably my favorite one on this list, and that is the Fume Knight. I covered this a while ago, and I don't remember much of the lore from Dark Souls 2, being my least favorite of the series, but a game I still did enjoy very much. Speaking of which, if you love Dark Souls 2, Lords of the Fallen is something I may cover on my other channel, which I'll link below. For the Fume Knight in Elden Ring, we have Guts Greatsword with Bloodflame Blade and Earthshaker with the follow-up sweep. Offhand is a thrusting sword with impaling thrust to give him the ideal build and setup. This one is a powerful build and looks cool with the Knight's Cavalry set altered. This set is perfect for a Fume Knight cosplay, and one I covered a while back that I wanted to highlight again and change the Ash to Earthshaker, which, like Flaming Strike, has become a favorite Ash in Elden Ring. I'm really enjoying Earthshaker, it's incredibly powerful, and the follow-up sweep fits the Fume Knight well. And we're going to be able to take the Magmorm down here in a second using Earthshaker after we get a nice poise break there, by the way. It does do a decent amount of poise damage too. We didn't use the offhand thrusting sword that much, it's more just to fit the Fume Knight theme. But overall, if you have a heavy Guts Greatsword and then you add Earthshaker to it, between that and the follow-up sweep, it's a lot of damage. Especially if you add in the Shard of Alexander. Overall, it's a very powerful Ash of War, and one that I'm liking more and more the more I use it. I definitely recommend Earthshaker. Let's get into equipment for this Fume Knight build and setup. After we show it off one more time, of course, I really like the Blood Flame look on the Guts Greatsword. It definitely gives you that Fume Knight look because the sword is red. We have the heavy Greatsword, Guts Greatsword with Earthshaker on it, a thrusting sword in blood with blood tax, the Knight's Cavalry set altered, Shard of Alexander, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Urtru's Favorite +2, Faith tier, and then we have the Charge tier. Let's get into stats. For stats, we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blood Flame Blade. We have 60 Vigor, we have 65 Strength, we have 25 Faith with the Faith tier so we can use our buffs. For a well-rounded and very powerful build, definitely recommend this one for the Fume Knight. From bonfires to graces, many of us have had experiences from the Souls games that we can't compare to anything else. It's allowed us to take on the fights we may thought we'd never get past and to overcome them to be more powerful and just get knocked down by the next boss again. This Elden Ring and Souls formula is an addicting one and one that can lead to both fun and frustration. I hope everyone enjoyed a completely different style of build video and something fresh. Thanks to everybody on Discord and have a wonderful day.